Jesus is someone who talks. He is not a distant God who we can't access or whose ways are nebulous and can't be fathomed. Sure, it says in Isaiah 55 that his ways are higher than ours, or his thoughts are higher than ours. But just because his ways and thoughts are higher doesn't mean that they can't be accessed. In fact, God, ever since the beginning, has always been a conversational God. In Genesis chapter 1, it says, God used to come down to the Garden of Eden to talk with Adam. Just imagine that. That's how man started his life on earth. And which father, because God is a father, which father does not like talking to his children? And so, hearing God is such a critical aspect of our relationship with him. And people think that God speaks occasionally. Not true. God enjoys talking as long as we go seek him. Time and time again in the Bible, we hear God saying, "Seek my face and you will find me." And so today we're going to talk about the simple principle of hearing God, because God is a conversational God. In fact, the Bible is one of the ways he communicates with us, but that was only to give us a platform to launch off so that we can engage him daily in conversation. Moses spoke to God, David spoke to God, Jesus spoke to God. I mean, it talks about how Jesus would wake up in the morning and disappear into the mountains to have conversations with his Father. And now it's your privilege and my privilege to do the same. And so what do we require in terms of learning how to hear God? The one primary and perhaps only requirement for hearing, once you're a believer, once you're a Christian, the only requirement for hearing is pursuit. What do you mean by pursuit? Just as you are able to hear, figure out, decipher, fathom the voice and the ways of someone you love, so as you begin to like God, you'll begin to hear him easily. Just as you spend hours speaking to the one you love and begin to figure out every little nuance in her life, what she means when she says what, every little move, so the Bible says that one can figure out God as you begin to spend time with him and become intimate with him. So pursuit of God is the one requirement to begin to hear him. The more you pursue him, the easier it is to hear him. In fact, there is a psalm where it says that just as a handmaiden has her eyes on her mistress and knows her every move, so my eyes will be on you, O Lord, and will know what you want. Beautiful. And so as you get to pursue God, you begin to hear him better. It's almost like a practice of hearing. Just assume you have an interest in motorcycles or in aircrafts. As you observe or hear the sound of the engine of a motorcycle, you begin to easily figure out if it's a Yamaha or a Honda or a Suzuki or the kind of bike it is. Why? Because you have such an interest in the engine and how it sounds. You can close your eyes, listen, and know the kind of vehicle it is. It's the same thing with God. As you engage him in conversation, as you begin to connect with him and ask this favorite question, Father, what do you want to do next? What do you want to do next, Father? What's your plan? As you begin to converse with him, he begins to speak because he loves children who seek him. Jesus used to operate like this. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 19 and 20 and verse 31, he puts it this way. He says, I don't do anything till I see my Father doing it. I don't say anything till I hear my Father saying it. This is how he used to operate. So there were days when he would go close to a blind man and lay his hands on the blind man and heal his eyes. Another day he would speak and the blind eyes would be open. The third day he would take clay, mix it, put it on the man's eyes, and the man's eyes would open. Why was it that Jesus used different ways of healing people? Why is it that he walked across the Sea of Galilee once, another time he rode across it, once he went around the shores? Why did Jesus do things differently? Because Jesus only did what his Father told him to. Hearing allows us to walk in the center of God's will. And once you begin to walk in the center of God's will, things begin to happen at a level that you and I can't achieve from a human perspective. To hear and to do is the easiest way to live the Christian life, and it becomes an absolute adventure. There is never a famine of God speaking. There is only a famine of hearing. Because God always wants to engage his children, just like any good father. This is one of the reasons God sent his son Jesus so that those that couldn't hear an invisible God could now hear a visible representation of God, the exact representation of God. And so you and I as Christians are supposed to show the world that we have a Father who actually speaks and answers, and that we can have conversations with Him. And the world hungers for it. One of the questions that I get asked most is, tell me something, how does your God talk? Because mine does not. And when people begin to see that you have a living relationship that engages the God of the universe, and you see actual evidence of it in things happening in your life and through your life to others, people begin to see the reality of a God who talks, and they begin to hunger for it. God's intent is, can I restore man to the relationship he had with me in the Garden of Eden before he fell? And you and I need to show the world that this is absolutely possible. This is the kind of Father that we have. And so, as we begin to progress into hearing, know that every year you can get better at hearing God. You can get better at hearing God. Today, you may hear at a level, and next year, you'll get closer to hearing God, because as you get more intimate with Him, you begin to hear Him more clearly. Every year, we'll find ourselves, if we pursue God, that we keep hearing Him clearer and clearer, because as the intimacy with God grows, so does hearing. This is what Jesus was trying to explain in John chapter 10 and 11, when He said that my sheep hear my voice, and they will not go after another. I don't know if you've ever been to a farm, but you'll find that if you were to stand at a farm and begin to call out at the sheep, they do not respond. And yet, when the farmer turns up or the shepherd turns up and calls out to the sheep, they recognize his voice immediately. Intimacy is critical. We don't need a quiet place to hear God. We just need intimacy. In fact, God would prefer that you hear Him in the midst of a crisis or a storm. This is what sheep look out for. Doesn't matter what is happening. Once they hear the shepherd's voice, they make a beeline towards the shepherd. My sheep will hear my voice, and they will not recognize or run after someone else's voice, Jesus said. Christians need, people need, creation needs to once again hear the voice of God. And you and I need to show them how this is done.